Welcome to First Unitarian Toronto. We're grateful to have you with us this morning, wherever you may be. My name is Dallas Bergen, and I'm joined by our ministers, Reverend Sean Newton and Reverend Lynn Harrison. Participating today are musicians Adam Sakiyama and Gabrielle Burns. We'll hear testimony from Rilla Clark and from Catherine Lake, our chair of Team Generosity. Behind the scenes, we are deeply grateful for Matthew Rideout, our AV engineer. As we begin today, we acknowledge and reflect upon the history of place. That in Toronto, we gather on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. These lands were covered by Treaty 13 and were part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, committing to share the land and its gifts. May we who are settlers here learn the histories and injustices of our past and present, and recognize our shared responsibility to the ongoing task of reconciliation. In preparation for our time together this morning, I welcome you into beloved community with one another. The flaming chalice is a symbol of this faith, one that brings together the ideas of freedom of religious thought and the sacredness of spiritual community. If you have a chalice or candle at home, I invite you to join me in kindling your flame as we speak our chalice lighting words. As we light our chalice, may its flame kindle within us the warmth of compassion, the glow of love, the fire of commitment, and the light of truth.
Come into this virtual space, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of learning, all seekers after what is true. Come into this place, whoever you are, lovers of wisdom, lovers of humanity, lovers of beauty. Come into this place where love surrounds us and lifts us and nurtures us. Come into this place, whoever you are. For ours is not a community of despair, but of hope. Not a place of judging, but of thanksgiving. Not a place of certainty, but of searching. Come, whoever you are. May we now make this time sacred in our coming together. From our many and varied paths, we unite here to build up a community of love and commitment and hope. To express the highest aspirations of our congregation, let us now join our voices as one in the words of our covenant. Love is our doctrine. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all.
I'm very pleased to bring you news from the life of our congregation. A quick reminder, in the interest of your privacy, that our services are streamed live to YouTube every Sunday morning. We try to keep the zoom lens on the speakers throughout the service, but at the same time, there are moments when the entire grid of faces can be seen on the screen. Unedited services are not available on YouTube after the day of the service. If you're willing, we do invite you to be visible on screen today, as this helps build community among us, but of course you may do so at your own discretion. If you're new to First Unitarian, do connect with us using the Say Hello form on our website, where you can also subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter First Light and easily make a financial donation, which is deeply appreciated. Immediately after the service today, newcomers are invited to attend our monthly newcomer information session, where you can learn more about our congregation, the Unitarian principles and sources, as well as Unitarian history. All are welcome. The link is on the website, and we'll also post it here in the chat. In Sean's First Light message this week, he brought to our attention the upcoming annual conference of the Canadian Unitarian Council. It will be held online this year from Friday, May 14th to Sunday, May the 16th. There are many workshops and activities of interest, and all of us are encouraged to register and attend. In particular, and before the conference, we're invited now to watch, not now this morning, but any time after the service today and in the weeks to come, to watch or read this year's keynote Confluence lecture. The Confluence lecture this year is delivered by Reverend Ann Barker of Westwood Unitarian in Edmonton. Her lecture is offered in 3 parts with reflection questions afterward. It's a very thought-provoking talk, inviting us to imagine our Unitarian future in exciting new ways. More information about the Confluence lecture and the entire conference can be found at the link I will post now in the chat. And it will also be in First Light and on the CUC website. Here at First Unitarian, as we continue to support the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, we need and appreciate your financial support in the form of your pledges. With a special message now to bring you up to date on this year's pledge drive, it's my pleasure now to welcome Catherine Lake.
Thanks, Lynn. So, as we are all aware, I hope, it's pledge season. And with that comes your opportunity to show what this place means to you and to provide financial support so we can continue to feed the spirit and nurture the world. In a moment, you'll be asked to type a word or two into the chat or the comment box on YouTube. I want you to think about what First Unitarian gives to you, what First Unitarian means to you, and why give to First. Our annual budget is $500,000 and our membership is 300. So we need everyone to pitch in, including those who aren't formally members. This is a shared community. We share the well of wisdom, inspiration, music, beauty, and purpose that we find here together. And we also share the expenses. As of yesterday, we've had about a 50% response rate to the pledge campaign. Thank you to everyone who has pledged. And for those who haven't, check your email, or if we don't have your email, please hit donate on the homepage, then scroll down and find make a pledge. Easy peasy. Now, as Adam plays for the next minute, I ask you to lift up 1 or 2 words into the chat or the YouTube comment box. 1 or 2 words that express what you find here, what gives you meaning, and why you give back to First Unitarian. Please go ahead and type your words into the chat or the comment box on YouTube. Okay, I should never worry that you're that you're at a loss for words to express the meaning we find here. That was just wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We will gather your words into a collage, and we'll post that up on the screen at the end of our service. And now, Rilla Clark, a new member at First, will share her testimony with us. Welcome, Rilla.
Thank you, Catherine. And good morning, everyone. As a new member of First, I've been asked to answer the question that Team Generosity has posed for all of us. What do I receive from First that nurtures my life and impacts our interconnected world? Although I only recently joined First, two things have always attracted me to UU. Firstly, the principle that we do not hold to one particular creed or dogma, because we believe that what matters is not who or what you believe in, but how you live your life. And secondly, the undivided oneness, or oneity, as Julian of Norwich would say. I was raised Anglican and was quite devout in my teenage years. I also spent most weekends on my grandparents' farm, lying between rows of corn with my cousins, gazing up at the sky and the clouds passing by, being in wonder and feeling a very real sense of interconnection with all beings. I had a deep sense of belonging, which left me, as sadly it does all of us sometime during childhood. That was when I first encountered the feeling of being separate from. It's this condition of separation and the longing to be one that has guided my spiritual journey throughout my life. In first year university, I was fortunate enough to take an elective in world religions. I was intrigued by the universal truths that are reflected in the core teachings of every religion. And I rejected dogma for mysticism and a direct relationship with God. I returned to nature as a source of oneness and interbeing, and meditation activated my feelings of connection. I decided to pursue Buddhism and paganism at that time. My life purpose was clear at a young age. I'm a seeker engaged in the third principle of UU, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning for myself. And I also enjoy creating processes whereby others can do this deep work within themselves. I've practiced Vipassana Buddhism for 40 years and tried always to live by the 5 precepts, which are very similar to the 7 UU principles. I traveled extensively in Asia, climbing in the pristine mountain ranges and sitting in ashrams in India, as well as the US and Canada. And it occurred to me that all of my community were pop-up communities, sitting in retreat with people, different groups of people each time. There was no constant community in my life. It was only when I spent time in the tiny kingdom of Bhutan for the first time in 1996 that I got an inside look at what it meant to live your spiritual principles in community. Curious, I returned several times, the most recent of which I taught school in a K-12 school for 2 months in Thimphu, the capital city. The kids began each day at home with their families in prayer and meditation, and Buddhist principles were embedded in the school curriculum. In fact, I was invited to teach them, which was very daunting. A different child led prayers in the outdoor assembly every morning, in the gardens which each class had planted and tended with love throughout the year. And the child would read a story that they had written themselves about their own practices of love, kindness, and justice in their daily lives. I was blown away to see these little 6-year-olds presenting the most beautiful story of how they lived their principles. So I started to think about the value of being a member of a consistent spiritual community. 6 months before the pandemic hit, I started to attend services at First. And I met some warm and welcoming people at coffee and re-met some of the people I'd worked with on the Syrian Family Project. Then came COVID, and my daily mantra became, I choose to keep my faith stronger than my fear. daunting indeed. Sean and Lynn's sermons are beautiful tapestries of poetry, wisdom from all traditions, thoughtful illustrations of the UU principles, stories grounded in real life, questions for consideration rather than answers to be swallowed whole, music, and humor. They inspire and nurture me as I reflect on them in the breakout groups with other members of this community and throughout my week. They're a form of mindfulness which cause me to pause, breathe, consider my thoughts, and allow me to make better choices. I have always worked to cultivate a peaceful heart and to be in service to others. But I realize now, at this time in my life, I really need community to provide tangible experiences of that. When I listen to the joys and sorrows that this congregation brings to service, focused on the deeds or sufferings of many different groups of people, and I listen to the committees reporting on their activism and engagement in various causes, I am encouraged, supported, and challenged to look for diverse opportunities myself to become an instrument of peace, love, and justice in this broken world. Not to give up, not to curl up, not to take the easy path, but to stand in the heat, knowing how many others here in this congregation are doing the same. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, your warm welcome, and your individual and joint commitment to spiritual growth, compassion, and social action.
I now invite you into a time of quiet meditation, contemplation, or prayer, beginning with poetry and then a time of silence. This poem is entitled Kindness by Rosemary Watola Trommer. Consider the tulip, how it rises every spring out of the same soil, which is, of course, not at all the same soil, but new. How long ago someone's hands planted a bulb and gave to this place a living scrap of beauty. Consider the 6 red petals, the yellow at the center, the soft green rubber of the stem, how it bows to the world, how the longer we sit beside it, the more we bow to it. It is something like kindness, is it not? The way someone plants in you a bit of beauty, a kind word perhaps, or a touch, the gift of their time or their smile. And years later, in the soil that is you, it emerges again, pushing aside the dead leaves, insisting on beauty, a celebration of the one who planted it, the one who perceives it, and the fertile place where it has grown.
We now enter a time of sharing the joys and concerns that weigh on us as individuals and as a community. The bonds of community are strengthened with the sharing of that which weighs on our hearts and minds, and the joys that lift us, both great and small. If you're watching on YouTube, please submit your sorrows and joys early, as there is a slight lag between live and the YouTube stream. Today, we are thinking of those around the world who are suffering, whose worth and dignity is denied. Our hearts go out to the people of India as COVID-19 and its variants ravage the country, with infrastructure unable to cope, oxygen supply depleted, oxygen needed to save lives. May we and the international community recognize the interdependence of all the world's peoples and nations. May humanitarian interests be put above profits, with open patents on the production of vaccines and a distribution that prioritizes saving lives. Today, we're sharing in sorrow in the deaths of 45 Israelis, many of them children and youth, trampled in a stampede at a religious pilgrimage for the Jewish holiday of Lag BaOmer. We hold the people of Myanmar and those killed or displaced by its military regime. May violence cease and may peace and free and fair elections come. We send loving care to all those stricken by this ongoing pandemic and wish wisdom and care upon our leaders and safety and protection for those who are most vulnerable. And moving from the wider world to concerns from within our congregation, I share news that Randy Black is unexpectedly in hospital this morning with a medical issue. We are holding him and his husband, David Rambach, in our hearts this morning. In the spirit of mutual love and care, I invite you to share your sorrows and concerns now by typing them in the chat or holding them in the silent sanctuary of your heart. I will do my best to honor these. We're thinking of Jill's brave student who has left an abusive home and is now in a shelter. And for Marilee Brand, remembering Chris Lowry, wife of Bruce Schwartzentruber, who died on May 1st over 20 years ago. Concern for people in Colombia, where the government has imposed a 20% tax on essentials like food and electricity. In response to giant protests, the army is patrolling the streets. And in Imbag, a small city where my son lives with his family, a student activist was killed. Holding Colombia in our thoughts. And from Lynn, Lynn's musician friend, Bob Cohen's brother Earl died suddenly on Friday. We're holding that family in prayers today. Winnie is naming the unconscious racism and elitism in the vaccine rollout. And from Ruth, again, lifting up India, their plight is our plight. May vaccines be made available to all people. And again, thinking of India and also, of course, neighboring Nepal, Margaret's young friend suffering there from COVID. And from Margaret Vandenberg, concern that the developed nations are not sharing their vaccines with developing and poor nations. And Sasha, thinking of those in Ontario who are denied paid sick leave during pandemic, and all of us who suffer a prolonged pandemic because of that denial. And in our complicated lives, there is much to celebrate. Milestones in our lives and the lives of our loved ones. I wish you a happy Beltane, May Day, and International Workers' Day. We are thankful to enter into the second half of the spring season, thankful for longer days and for the flourishing beauty of nature that is all around us. We express deep gratitude and elation as we continue to see more and more Canadians having received a dose of the vaccine, and we celebrate the news of delivery of millions of more doses in the weeks ahead. We celebrate a US presidential address to Congress that included phrases, "Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President." White supremacy is terrorism. Trickle-down economics have never worked. To transgender Americans, your president has your back. We look to a future with hope that these statements are followed by action, by legislation that dismantles systems of oppression, bringing justice and equity. And may we see the same here in Canada, and may we do the work as individuals required to make it so. You're invited to share your gratitudes, that which is lifting your spirit and bringing you joy today. Celebrating all the Canadians who have been vaccinated to date. Thinking of the family of Makia Bryant, who was killed by police at the age of 15 in Columbus, Ohio recently. Indeed, a concern and sorrow. And Maya celebrating being 20. Happy birthday, Maya, and congratulations. And Ruth, the joy of riding bicycle. And from Catherine, the dramatically falling infection, hospital admissions, and death rates from COVID-19 in the UK. And another happy birthday to Maya. From Susan Richards, continued concern for all with mental health issues and their families. And Jill's thinking of Amelia, who has decided to attend UBC in the fall. And Linda, thankful, expressing gratitude to whomever chooses the beautiful slides for our service. Those are usually chosen by Sean and Lynn, and our thanks to them and anyone who contributes those for those times of meditation and thought. From Art, a rose-breasted grosbeak sitting on the feeder just outside the window. And Barbara, thankful for the first true spring that she can remember. Lindsay's thankful for a deer in the ravine. And from Dana, grateful for their wife, Sydney, who turns 30 on Wednesday. A happy birthday to Sydney. Gratitude from Kira for their cat, who keeps them sane in this prolonged lockdown. And gratitude for a fun and enlightening workshop attended this weekend, that from Sue. And also from another Sue, Sue Burla, of the amazing flowers and cherry blossoms in Mount Pleasant Cemetery. And John and Eileen, thankful for a backyard visit with son and family yesterday, and granddaughter Lexi. Wonderful news. And Amanda, whose 26-year-old daughter has started to read the Bible. And from Winnie McDonough, friends and family. And Jean Geary lifts up everyone separated from their loved ones during this pandemic, and especially that distance from daughter Monica. Grateful for Monica and her resilience, and the resilience of all as we struggle in this time. And celebrating Marilyn Donofrio's 73rd birthday this Wednesday. Happy birthday, Marilyn. That's a wonderful joy as well. And much gratitude for beautiful hiking weather yesterday from Moara. Will you join me in a closing blessing? Spirit of life, known to us by many names and beyond all naming, may the sharing of our joys and sorrows deepen the connections between us here and with the wider world. May our hearts be filled with gratitude for all we have and for the potential that lies in our every word and deed. May we find compassion for all who suffer. May we listen to the voices with different backgrounds and perspectives than our own. May we be open to dialogue, bridge building, reconciliation, and commit our hearts, hands, and minds to action to build a world that is more fair and just. Amen.
A few years ago, I spent a lot more time in the Atlanta airport than I ever wanted to. Massive storms up and down the east coast of the US had grounded my flight as well as everyone else's. But the real storm that was brewing that afternoon was to be found inside the airport. The departure gates were packed with people. Plane loads upon plane loads of people were growing crankier by the minute as they watched their best laid plans unraveled by Mother Nature. With every seat taken, the unlucky were left to spill and sprawl on the floor. Carry-on luggage was crafted into makeshift cushions. Folks staked out their turf with coats and backpacks and hostile glances. Strangers entered packs to protect each other's precious parcels of land, while they, one at a time, went to stand in the long, snaking queues for the washrooms or whatever remaining scraps of food they could find. It was not a pretty scene. And as it became clear that I was going to be stuck there for the better part of the day, I knew I needed to come up quickly with a plan B to hold on to what was left of my own patience. As much as I find airports to be fascinating laboratories of the human condition, as good a place as any to bear witness to intense joy and utter agony, I knew I had limited reserves for riding out this storm by staying put in the eye of it. So with plenty of time on my hands, I decided to check out the airport's Interfaith Chapel. Now, calling that particular space a chapel was something of a stretch. It was nothing more than a bland little room, devoid of any religious ornamentation other than the Qibla in the corner pointing the direction to Mecca. To be sure, there were kneelers and prayer rugs available, but that was about it. If it weren't for the sign out in the hall with its all-inclusive androgynous figure in a posture of prayer, it would have been difficult to distinguish that space from the waiting room of any poorly furnished doctor's office. Still, I had set out seeking an oasis, a place apart from the chaos just down the corridor, and I thought this just might fit the bill. But when I entered the chapel, I discovered that I was not alone. Indeed, I had walked in on a concert, or rather, I had intruded upon someone's private practice time. The woman was instantly apologetic, explaining that in her travels as a professional oboist, she had found out-of-the-way airport chapels to be a safe bet as a quiet place to pull out her instrument and make full use of her layover. I assured her that I was not bothered by her practicing, and I confessed that I hadn't actually come to the chapel to pray, but in hopes of finding a quiet place myself to do some writing. I told her that I would very much enjoy if she would continue to play. And so we commenced our little salon right there in the chapel, with me writing letters while being serenaded, as luck would have it, by the principal oboist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. Eventually, a Muslim man came in, and the oboist and I respectfully set aside our work as he took out a rug, faced east, and fell to his knees, rising and kneeling again and again in Islam's moving pattern of prayer. A bit later, a woman came in and with a rosary in her hand, knelt for a few moments and then was gone. Eventually, the oboist headed off for her flight home to New York. I stayed on for a couple more hours as a handful of other people came and went. Just before I left, a woman entered the room, and when it was clear that I wasn't busy praying, she asked if I was the airport chaplain. I had no idea at the time that there was such a thing. I explained that I was not the chaplain, but that I was a minister and that I would be happy to listen if she needed to talk. And talk she did. She told me about the challenges she was facing and about her faith that God would help her to figure things out. She explained that she lived in Atlanta and worked there at the airport. And then she invited me to attend her church whenever I was back in town, which was no small thing given that her church was predominantly African American and I was, clearly enough, not. Before she left, she asked if I would join her in a prayer. And so I bowed my head with hers and closed my eyes while she, as they say in the South, prayed up a storm of her own. We parted company, and in time I made my way back to my terminal and gate and finally headed off toward home. But my experience that long afternoon there in the chapel has stayed with me. Amid the storms of this life, our congregation sometimes functions like that humble little chapel, with spiritual tourists and travelers passing through, finding rest and comfort and solace when needed, but not always taking the risk to engage one another deeply in matters of the heart and head. It's very easy to keep things at a superficial level where we aren't confronted with the discomfort of our differences, each of us just doing our own thing. A few years ago, a Unitarian Universalist commission studied the question of what it means for us to truly engage our theological diversity. For all of our many theological beliefs, the commission confirmed that we as UUs, by and large, struggle to talk to each other about what we hold most dear, about what we consider to be true in matters of faith and belief. And the reason most often given when people were pressed was the fear that if we were to do so, if we really were to engage across barriers of belief, that our congregations would fall apart under the stress of what we might find out from one another. Now, to be fair, that fear is not completely unfounded. The history of religion and really of the world itself is littered with splits and reforms and revolutions fought over theological differences, some of which now seem so profoundly irrelevant as to make even more tragic and useless the blood shed in their defense. Now, it must be said that in this life, we may well find times when there are differences that are simply beyond all hope of being bridged. A few years ago, my friend Sam, on his wedding day, got off to a very bad start with his future mother-in-law. He was marrying a Hindu woman. The wedding was a proud milestone in the life of her family. And though the ceremony itself was created to reflect the couple's interfaith background, it was not without its challenges. When Sam arrived early for the ceremony, he was quite horrified to discover that a large swastika, that ancient Hindu symbol of good fortune, had been intricately crafted out of marigolds and placed into the elaborate arch over the very spot where the couple was to be married within a couple of hours. Something had to be done. Sam, being Jewish, explained to his soon-to-be mother-in-law that the symbol had to go. There were guests coming who had survived the Holocaust. There were members of his family who had been put to death under that symbol during the war. In turn, the mother of the bride explained to Sam how deeply significant the symbol was to Hindus and insisted that it stay put. In the end, the symbol was covered over for the ceremony and unveiled for the reception, a compromise that left everyone unhappy, though fortunately at different times. That is, of course, the difficulty of sometimes engaging our differences. When we take up the risk, we are sure on occasion to invite upset and cause misunderstanding. Despite our best intentions, we may even cause offense. And we may well learn that these differences are real and important and essential to the core identity that gives both to ourselves and to others our most sacred sense of self. But too often we squander the gifts of our diversity by steering clear of the real tensions and challenges that come with it. We take the path of least resistance by defaulting to the lowest common denominator. We keep silent to keep the peace, rather than recognizing the blessings that come through our willingness to engage one another more deeply in the great questions of life, rather than practicing the art of respectful listening, mulling over ideas that are at odds with our own, and opening ourselves to the sacred possibility that our own minds could be changed by taking in the insights and wisdom of others. I say this not as one who has mastered any of it, but as one who continues to learn and struggle with building and sometimes rebuilding bridges across the chasms that would divide us. In our tradition, the open invitation to embark on the religious quest is coupled with an obligation to do so with care and intention. Our principles require of us a search for truth that is both free and responsible. The quest for truth, far from being the cakewalk some imagine it to be, is an arduous path, much of it paved by others who've gone before us, that invites us to critically engage the world of ideas with every faculty we can summon from within us. Now, for the longest time, the gift of reason was the primary tool that we UUs drew on for this journey. It's the one that early Unitarians relied on when they scoured the Christian scriptures and found that, as pertains to the doctrine of the Trinity, there is very little biblical support. The primacy of reason was the enduring gift of the Enlightenment, and many of the ideas and ideals of which have found a lasting home in our tradition. And so it has been the tool used by those who came before us in questioning the foundations of the faith they had inherited, as they stripped away superstition and the influence of what some called priestcraft. Along the way, this process was not without its bitter battles, as the wisdom of one era inevitably gave way to that of the next. As my colleague Suzanne Meyer says of our history, we would do well to remember that within our movement, the radical young Turks of one generation frequently go on to become the revered sages of the next. We have, though, by and large, over the decades and now the centuries, cherished this path of religious evolution. The motto, Semper Reformanda, always being reformed, has been with us from our beginnings. But when it comes to the evolving quest for truth at the heart of our faith, it turns out that we can only do so much of it alone. Ours is not a do-it-yourself religion, but a faith forged in the crucible of engaged and ongoing dialogue. At our best, we struggle through with each other, with our history, and with the world of ideas to decide anew each day what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. That is why I believe that Unitarian Universalism is the hardest religion we could possibly ever love, not because we have to make it up on our own, but because we are called to make it up together. That is what is meant by our third principle that calls us to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, that alongside our cherished intellectual freedom, we pledge to hold ourselves responsible, even accountable to each other. That requires relationships that are real. It's the delicate balancing act at the heart of our faith and our life together. Now, to be sure, there are days when any UU might well be tempted to abandon the challenge of it altogether and to strike out on their own. But when we live into the promise of this faith and choose instead to engage, to risk saying, "Help me understand what you mean by that," or "That doesn't make a lick of sense to me, but can you tell me how it does for you?" Such questions are for us the door to what Unitarian theologian Henry Nelson Wyman called creative interchange. It is that sacred give and take between people that offers, he said, an appreciative understanding of the original experience of another. To sit with someone and truly hear the heart of who they are, to listen to the truth of their lives, is to engage in what I believe is the closest thing that we Unitarian Universalists have to a sacrament. It is no accident that each week in our worship service, we affirm together in the words of our covenant that the quest for truth is our sacrament. For such an exchange, whether it happens in a journey group or in a breakout room after the service or while chatting with a friend on a walk, can hold transformative power and offer to us, in Wyman's sense, a glimpse of the divine. In taking in the testimony of another and witnessing to the truths they revere, we bear witness to the sacred struggle that is life itself, a struggle that yields one of life's most startling and stubborn lessons, that we are what we do with what we have. Our call is to look deeply into the life of one another, not with judgment or scorn, but with compassion and curiosity, with wonder and gratitude for the inspiration of seeing how someone else engages the great challenges and questions of life. When we open ourselves to the heart of another, we witness the strength and resilience of the human spirit. We learn that what touches the life of one of us affects us all, and that in that sacred truth rests our saving hope that we are not alone in this world, and that it is just downright dangerous to pretend otherwise. This, dearly beloved, is our lived religion and our living religion. May we commit ourselves to the path that brings about genuine encounter, connections that crack open the heart and that expand our minds, with truths still to be discovered, and the sacred possibility that, in whatever way we understand it, we ourselves might grow with every day into harmony with the divine. So may it be. Amen.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to Tenny's fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, a life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to Tenny's fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, a life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Sustained now by our community, blessed by our covenant, uplifted in mind and renewed in spirit, let us move forward with courage and with care to meet the days to come. Blessed be.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Gabby, for that very, very beautiful piece, inspiring. And thank you all who have participated in today's service. Just a reminder in a few moments to extinguish your chalice if you have one burning at home. I won't do it right this moment, but do remember that in the next few minutes. In a few moments, we'll all be invited to join virtual coffee hour breakout groups. This is a great opportunity to go deeper with today's ideas and to get to know people in the congregation. Today, our reflection question is, what truths have you learned from others on your path? Also, a reminder, if you're new to the congregation, you can attend the newcomer information session just after the service, accessible from the link that is posted in the chat. But now, before we break out into those breakout groups, we have something very special. Catherine Lake is with us again for a big reveal of what we all did together earlier in the service. Catherine?
Thank you, Lynn. And just before we close, wow, what a well of inspiration and beauty and ideas. And I'm encouraging people to feed the well so it can continue to sustain us. Here is our collage of inspiration and connection. And today, plan for generosity. Take a minute to express your gratitude and pledge to support your First Unitarian community. Thank you.
Thank you.